name is Brady Deering and I'm with the Whynot Company, and this is the build video for my wife's breakfast nook table. It's a round top table with a square pedestal base, and it's made from black walnut. So I really hope you enjoy the video. I'm going to jump right in and show you what I did to get started, and I'm going to walk you through step by step what I did all the way to the end. So I appreciate you watching, and I hope you like this video. Thanks. The first step of any project always starts at the miter saw, it seems. So the first thing I did was take the 8 to 10 foot length rough sawn boards that are 8/4 inches thick, which just means 2 inches or 8/4 of an inch, to 42 inches in length. So this was appropriate for the X part of the base, the center pedestal, and the length that I needed to make the proper diameter for the tabletop of 40 inches. So once I got those cut, I face jointed them first, which I forgot to record. Then I went and surfaced the other side with the thickness planer. And then once that was done, I moved on to the joiner to edge joint one of the edges square. Once that process was complete, I moved on to the table saw and ripped the final rough sawn edge square with the opposite face. This got me to a rough width that I needed for all my glue ups. So here I'm gluing up the first piece of the X base. That'll probably make a little more sense later, but plenty of glue here. And then once I had the glue evenly spread, I'm folding them over to laminate them together. Plenty of clamps as well, always a must-have. So here I want to show something that a lot of people may not know about, which is the tendency of wood to move after it's milled. So this board on the left here was milled the day before I recorded this video, and it was square when I finished that evening. So a lot of times when you start to mill lumber, you can release stresses that are held in the wood. And so it's always good to mill your lumber the day or a few days before you go to use it. This ensures that the lumber that you're using is done moving before you glue it up and put it in your project. So here I'm gluing up the second piece of that X base, just like I did the first. Nothing special here. Once that was done, I decided that I'd move on to the center pedestal. So this was 3 pieces laminated together to form the center pedestal, just a little over 6 inches thick at this point. So I intentionally made it larger than 6 inches so I could plane it down to exactly 6 inches square. Once the center pedestal was dry, I face jointed one side to ensure that when I went to the thickness planer, it was flat. So here I am getting the opposite side that I face jointed flat and parallel. And then here I'm squaring up the ends with the bandsaw, which was the only thing that I had that would cut that thick of stock easily. I squared it up on both ends using the miter gauge that came with my bandsaw. Once that was complete, I moved on to the pieces of the X base. So I decided that I wanted to do a half lap joint to join the 2 pieces of the X base together. So here I am just kind of dialing in on the width. You can see I'm removing some of those chips, testing the fit, and then sneaking back up on it here just to make sure that it's nice and tight. You want these joints to be tight, but not too tight. It's kind of an experimentation thing. You don't want it to be so tight that when the glue swells, when it dries, that it cracks your joint. So once I got both of those half laps cut, I moved on to carve the design in the ends of this base. So this is where the learning started on this project, was cutting out the center pedestal, which is something I've never done before. The Woodwork Kings have a really good video that they actually released after I had done this, that is a better method for cutting out these center square pedestals. So if you want to check out their video, head over to their Instagram page. But the way that I did it was I made a 1/4 inch plywood template with the design that I wanted and traced it on all 4 sides. Once I had that trace, I began cutting it out on the bandsaw. And this is where my method had a weakness, which is I had to tape the template over the sides that were already cut to sort of transfer my cut line onto that curved surface. It worked, but it was more difficult than other ways that I've seen done. But you live and you learn. So once I got all those cut out on the bandsaw, I sanded it by hand and with the spindle sander, and then finished it with my orbital palm sander. Once I finished that, I moved on to the other part of the base and rounded over all the corners with the 3/8 round over bit. I even rounded over the joint where the half lap would be, just for completeness and to make it look nice. So once I got that done, I glued up the half lap joint with some clamps, made sure it was square, and then I did a dry fit with the center pedestal once that was done. So now it's time to attach the center pedestal to the base. I drilled 3 3/4 inch holes with a Forstner bit to accept 3/4 inch dowels that were about 2 inches long, so about 1 inch into each piece was the most that I could drill with this drill depth guide at the time. So once that was done, I moved on to the center pedestal and drilled matching holes there, 3 in a diagonal pattern from corner to corner. Once that was complete, I put a little bit of glue into the holes and then hammered the dowels in. I did sand some of the diameter off of the dowels with some 80 grit sandpaper so that it wouldn't be too tight of a fit. So it looks a little bit tighter in the video than it actually was. Then I put a touch of glue on the X base and glued up the center pedestal to the base. Once that was done, I sanded the whole thing to 220 and put the first coat of Odie's Oil Super Duper oil on the base. I'm applying this with a white non-woven abrasive pad from Mirka, and then wiping it off with a cotton terry towel. So I did 2 coats of the Super Duper oil, which is what's shown here, and then finished it with a coat of the Universal oil. Once that was done, I was able to move on to the adjustable feet. So here I had a kit from Easy Lock that I bought for their 5/16 adjustable feet. Here's the stainless steel insert and the installation tool that comes with it. You chuck that up in a drill. It's got a slot that fits in the threaded insert, and then you just screw it in. It's really easy. So I was really happy with those. So I've already milled the lumber for the top of the table. Nobody wants to see me just repeatedly mill lumber. It's boring. So here I am gluing up the tabletop. It was a total of 7 pieces. That was intentional so that the middle board could be the center and there'd be an even number amount of boards on either side. So once I got them glued up, I used F-clamps or C-clamps to keep the joints on the ends together at the same level, and then I clamped them down with the parallel clamps. Once that was done, I had to fill some of these large cracks and voids and knots with epoxy. So here I'm using the Kimtech epoxy and some black dye just to make it solid black. So it's 2 parts of one to 1 part of the other of the hardener, and just mixing it up for 2 minutes and then pouring it in the cracks. I had to do this a few times as the epoxy would settle and go deeper into the crack. I'd planned to cut the tabletop out on my bandsaw, but it was just too heavy to maneuver, so I decided to use the jigsaw. I put 2 powder-coated seat channels underneath the table to increase the table's stability over time as the wood moves. I also used the Rampatech inserts that they recommended. So here I am laying them out, just kind of a rough layout, and then I came back with my square, made sure they were parallel with each other and then perpendicular with the boards, and then marked them out with a Sharpie. Once that was done, I put in a 1/2-inch router bit to route the grooves. I'm actually using the C-channel as a straight edge. So once I cut the depths necessary for each side and then the ends there, I cut a recess for the middle part of the channel to where it would sink below the surface of the bottom of the table. So you can see how those turned out here. And then I marked the slot locations, drilled these out by hand. Hindsight, I should have used a drill guide. Once that was done, I made a template that was the exact shape of the top of the center pedestal and marked the back location. Then I marked the center, and then I went 1.5 inches up from the center on the corner-to-corner line to mark the locations of the other dowels. Here I'm using the drill guide to drill out those dowel locations, and then I'm going to use this to transfer the hole locations between the tabletop and the pedestal to ensure that they're in the same location. Here I'm just rounding over the corners of the tabletop, the last step really, before I finish sand and then glue the top to the base. Once the holes were drilled on the tabletop and the center pedestal in the same location, I used the template to trace out where the pedestal was going to be. This allows me to outline it with painter's tape, which ensures that none of the finish will get in this area, so that when I glue up, it'll be a clean surface for the glue to adhere to. Next, I did the same finishing process for the table that I did for the base. 2 coats of the Oatey Super Duper and finished it with the Universal. Here I'm measuring the depth of the holes, just confirming that. The outside ones couldn't be as deep because of the design of the pedestal. I didn't want it to drill through, so they only ended up sticking about 3/4 of an inch. The center one was about 1.25 inches. So here, my wife and I are putting the center pedestal on the tabletop. We had a little bit of difficulty, but we finally got it down with the help of some parallel clamps. It was just a really tight fit. Well, here it is. I'm really happy with how it turned out. And I know that it was a lot of work, and this was a little bit longer video, but if you've made it this far and you enjoyed it, I'd really appreciate if you would like and subscribe to my YouTube channel and follow me on Instagram and Facebook. There will be more to come, and I really appreciate it.